Hey, welcome back to another hand history review. This in this video, we are going to discuss how to get more value out of your entire range. And if that seems possibly a little confusing at first, I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So, bad player. This is a 2-5 game. This is a hand that I played not too long ago. Decides a limp. I attempt to isolate and raise on the button with ace 10 suited. I think that's very standard. A thinking player in the big blind decides to go ahead and call, as does the bad limper. So ace 9-4, very static texture, very dry. It's important in this spot to understand range and polarity advantage. The thinking player would likely 3-bet a lot of his better ace X hands. He obviously would 3-bet a lot of his Broadway pairs, even 10s, 9s, perhaps 8s as well. So I think he is deprived of a lot of those nutty, like stronger combos that I absolutely have in my range. I think the bad player, due to his limp call preflop, I think that caps his range quite a bit. It's the same thing as the thinking player. He just doesn't have the ace king, ace queen, ace jack suited, ace 10 suited, I would think, top set, kings, queens, jacks, etc. So I have a pretty big range advantage in the spot over both of these players. Because of that, and they'll both check to me, which I think is standard by them. I do, yeah, I'm going to turn that off so it's not confusing anybody, even though Snowy agreed, I believe, with, we'll take a look at that real quick, actually. Yeah, Snowy likes small bet. I'm not surprised by that, so I'm going to get into why that is the case. When you have a pretty significant range and polarity advantage, but mainly the range advantage, you can bet smaller with more of your range. So you can essentially bet more frequently when you do have the range advantage. The reason that I can do this and want to do this is I can get more value out of my range. I can bet more combos in my range for a smaller sizing than I can when I bet larger. Because when I bet larger, I'm obviously not getting worse combos to call as much, and I'm risking a little bit more when I am bluffing. So it makes sense to me, and according to like a lot of the solvers, Snowy has its own like kind of algorithm where it's a solver within itself, but it makes a lot of sense to me to bet small and to put these guys in a tough spot where they can't just defend with top pair. They can't just defend with even middle pair. There's going to have to be some worse combos they defend with. They're going to have to attack this sometimes, even though they don't have the range or polarity advantage. They can't allow me to bet this small with my button raising range on this texture. I don't have as tight of a range here as I would have under the gun, for example. So they need to play tough in the spot, and a lot of times they don't. They play pretty passively, pretty straightforward. The small bet is going to accomplish a lot. We are going to get more value out of our whole range in this spot. So even though we are betting very small here, if we were heads up, like let's say it was myself and just the thinking player in the big blind, I think I could actually bet probably 80% of the time, if not even a little bit more than that. If I were under the gun, I think I can bet actually 100% of my range for a small sizing if heads up. Multi-way, though, I don't think I can bet 80 to 100% of the time. I do think I can bet 70 to 75% of the time here. So there's still going to be a little bit of polarization going on. I'm probably going to check my kings, queens, tens most every time. Going to check back perhaps some weaker aces to balance that a little bit, considering that I do have this thinking player in the hand. He's going to think if I check back and I always bet top pair plus, then he can just go bet, turn, and river and probably take down the pot quite a bit. So I think it's a situation where I should check back some weaker ace X combos. Does ace 10 fit in? I don't think so. It's pretty strong at this point. I mentioned they don't have a lot of ace jack, ace queen, ace king, so ace 10 is actually quite strong. I view it more as like ace queen in this particular spot. So I do go ahead and bet here. Other combos you can start c-betting with are going to be your combos that have either like the most equity as a bluff and or combos that block some of their continuing range. So combos like king, queen with a backdoor flush draw, 8-7 with a backdoor flush draw, 6-5 with a backdoor flush draw, anything where you have a couple of backdoor options going on. King, queen is going to have outs in the form of a better pair when you do get called by 9x, or let's say pocket 8s, pocket 7s, whatnot. It's nice to have with those Broadway cards a backdoor suit as well. That gives you additional equity to barrel with in the form of maybe you pick up a straight draw, maybe you pick up a flush draw. Now with like king, queen, queen, jack, you don't necessarily have to be suited. You can start betting those along with, obviously your value hands when you start bluffing here, because if you think about it, there's not really a lot of natural bluffs that can happen here. There's no such thing as like a gutter. You're pretty much going to have air. When you're multi-way, betting the third pair or really low pocket pairs makes a lot of sense. They have no showdown value. So like 5-4 suited, 6-4 suited here, those are going to be really good candidates for essentially like some semi-bluffs. You have trips and 2 pairs outs. They do not have showdown value. I would much rather check a hand like 9x or pocket jacks compared to 4x because those have quite a bit more showdown value. So I think we have a pretty good grasp of what's going on here and why we're betting small, what kinds of combos we're going to bet small. The thinking player decides to call and the bad player folds. So now we see the 8 of clubs on the turn. He is pretty much almost always going to check in the spot. I think he really should be. So this is a situation where even though we bet small on the flop, we are going to start to polarize a little bit on the turn here. We can't bet everything that we did on the flop. It doesn't make sense. Our range will not be able to support that bet. So I think it's a situation where I start to size up a little bit. I start to polarize. I'm going to check back some weaker ace-x hands on this turn that maybe I did c-bet on the flop. Let's say like ace-8. Well, not ace-8 at this point. Obviously, that'd be 2 pairs. But ace-7, ace-6, ace-5, ace-3, ace-deuce. I think those are very good candidates for checkbacks here, so that when we do check back on the turn, we can show up with some top pairs in the river, facing his often river stab, I think. But I think ace-10 and ace-jack can be close. I think in a lot of situations, those can be actually good checkback candidates. The reason that I don't think we should be checking in this spot is, once again, if we go back to his pre-flop action, his flop action, I don't think he has as much ace-king to ace-jack in his range, if almost none. I think he has a little bit of ace-jack. But ace-king, ace-queen, I think those 3-bet a good amount of the time pre-flop. So like I said before, I think ace-10 is actually closer to like ace-queen in this spot. It's actually quite a bit stronger. So for that reason, I do think that in this spot we should go ahead and bet. I start to size up a little bit. I think half pot is fine after betting for 4th to around 3rd pot on the flop. And when he calls, I think that we can very often label him as having a lot of ace-x. He perhaps has some 9x that he feels like he needs to defend with. I think that is very possible that, obviously if he's only defending top pair plus in that spot, he's probably overfolding. So there's going to be quite a few like 9x hands. I don't think he has a lot of pocket pairs in between there, like I said, the Broadway pairs, because I think he does 3-bet those most of the time. But when we get to the river here, I think it becomes a situation where, do I have enough of a hand to go for a 3rd street of value? Is it going to be too thin? What am I getting to call at that point? The problem is I think he's mostly defending with just ace-x. And there are a lot of lower ranking cards on this board that now he has like 2 pairs on. I think he would possibly check raise on the turn with a lot of his aces up. But I'm really only, I think, getting called by like ace-7, maybe ace-3, ace-deuce some of the time. Otherwise, I think he does show up with some ace-jack, some 2 pairs that were played a little bit slower, perhaps. It's pretty close, but I do decide to go ahead and check back. Now, if this were a call station, not so much of a thinking player, if he just is going to call with even like 9x in the spot, 8x, obviously then worse aces, then yeah, I think we can go ahead and get that 3rd street of value. But I think it is a little bit thin there. What is the worst combo I would value bet? I think with this particular player, it's interesting. I think ace-king could fit in sometimes, but I really think it's going to be a lot of like 2 pairs plus. Aces up, straights, sets if I got them. And then obviously what I have is my bluffs. But I would say at this point, ace-10 is pretty close. I think it's borderline. I think it feels like a check back to me. So Pretty interesting hand overall. The main takeaways that I want you guys to come away with are why we are betting for like fourth to around third pot in spots like this. Remember or keep in mind, if you have the range advantage, you can do that more often, and you get more value uh, essentially out of your entire range when you are able to bet more combos. Make these guys feel indifferent, put them in tough spots. So yeah, if there are any questions or comments, go ahead and let me know. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video.